You don't forget the sound of betrayal. It doesn't come like thunder or warning bells. It comes sharp, sudden like glass breaking inside your chest. That day started like any other. I was in the kitchen, half listening to the radio, swirling a spoon through my coffee while the morning sunlight poured through the window. I had just gotten back from the store with fresh bread and almond milk, Tessa's favorite, and I was humming some old tune without thinking. Life was ordinary, simple, and then, all at once, it wasn't. I heard the door open, and I figured it was Tessa's sister dropping by again unannounced, like she always did. Alina, she had a way of walking into our home like she paid rent. She barely looked me in the eye most days, which I didn't mind. I tolerated her for my wife's sake. But that morning, she came in with a different kind of energy. Off, nervous, wide-eyed. And behind her was Tessa, her face already pinched with tension like she had just been told someone died. I turned around slowly, coffee cup still warm in my hand, ready to say good morning. But I didn't get the chance. Adrienne got me pregnant. 7 words. Just like that, Alina's voice cracked when she said it, and she even added a tremble to her lip, like some badly rehearsed play. And I stood there frozen. The air stopped moving. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I didn't respond, not because I was guilty, but because my brain refused to register that this was happening in real life. What kind of joke was this? But Tessa didn't ask me anything, didn't look for truth in my eyes. She didn't even blink, her face twisted in pure disgust and without hesitation. Crack. Her palm collided with my cheek so violently that my head snapped sideways and the mug in my hand slipped, shattering on the tile floor. I didn't even bring my hand up to touch my face. I was too stunned. Not because it hurt, but because in 1 second the woman I had built a life with, shared secrets with, whispered to in the dark, had turned into a stranger with fire in her eyes and poison in her mouth. "Tessa," I croaked, finally finding my voice. "What the hell are you?" But before I could finish, her brothers stormed in like they had been waiting outside the door with their sleeves rolled up. Jared and Marco, built like linebackers, always had something to prove. They didn't ask any questions either. Just grabbed me, one by each arm, and dragged me through the house like I was a stray dog tracking mud on white carpets. I was still barefoot, still wearing my old t-shirt, still trying to make sense of what the hell just happened. "Get your hands off me," I muttered. But it came out too soft, too confused. They weren't listening anyway. Once we were outside, Jared punched me in the stomach without warning. Marco shoved me against the fence so hard that I saw stars. I didn't fight back. I don't know why. Maybe I should have. Maybe I should have yelled, called them liars, thrown punches of my own. But I didn't. Neighbors peeked from windows. Someone across the street started filming. I caught the glint of a phone camera just as Jared spat at my feet and shouted, "You sick freak!" My vision blurred, but not from pain, from shame. The kind that didn't belong to me, but had been stuffed into my throat anyway. They left me there, bruised, humiliated, alone. And Tessa, she didn't follow me outside. She didn't check to see if I could still stand. She just stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her wedding ring still on her hand, like it meant something. Her expression was a mixture of hurt and certainty, like she had already buried me in her mind. I limped to the edge of the street. My phone buzzed over and over. Messages from people I hadn't spoken to in months. Calls I didn't answer. I didn't know what I was supposed to say. Hey, funny thing. My wife's sister accused me of something vile, and apparently I've already been tried, convicted, and sentenced Before I could ask what the hell was going on, I went back inside and packed a bag. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't try to explain. What was the point? They didn't want the truth. They wanted a villain, someone to blame, a man they could throw stones at and feel righteous for doing it. You spend your life building a home, thinking love means safety. But the truth is, people will turn on you the moment it's easier than asking hard questions. I stared at the cracked mug on the floor, then down at my trembling hands. My fingers had blood on them from the broken ceramic or the punches. I couldn't tell. It didn't matter. I showered. I wrapped a towel around my ribs. I wrote a single line on the bathroom mirror with soap. You didn't even ask. Then I left. No screaming, no grand exit. Just a man with a bruised jaw and an empty heart walking out of the life he thought was real. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. Funny thing is, you always think you'll notice the exact moment your life falls apart. Like maybe there will be sirens or some deep internal alarm. But all it took was a lie and a slap. And that slap, it didn't just hit my face. It killed a part of me I'll never get back. They say the truth will set you free. But that's only if someone sticks around long enough to hear it. 2 days after I left, I checked my email at a small public library on the edge of town. Nothing big, just trying to access my accounts, cancel subscriptions, update passwords. But then I saw the subject line, Notice of Administrative Leave. It was from my company. I sat there in that stiff wooden chair with my hoodie pulled low and read the message 3 times. The words didn't change. Given the serious allegations circulating online, the board has decided it is in the company's best interest to initiate a separation process, pinning a formal investigation. What allegations? I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't spoken to a soul except for the gas station clerk and a motel owner who only cared if my card swiped. But the gossip had grown legs. I logged on to social media, something I rarely used, and there it was, a thread. No names, but enough breadcrumbs for anyone who knew us. Married man, sister-in-law, scandal, pregnancy, betrayal, justice. Posts littered with vague accusations, quotes taken out of context, and of course, people offering opinions like they were eyewitnesses. Men like this are everywhere. He deserves to rot. Why aren't more women believed? Trash. Just trash. It was like watching my own funeral, one held on the internet, where the crowd throws stones instead of flowers. By the 3rd day, my landlord texted, "Hey man, sorry, just business. But the other tenants are concerned. I'll need you to vacate by the end of the week." I stared at my phone for a long time before typing out, "No problem. I'll be gone today." And I was. I didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't ask for time to explain, because I understood something. Now, when you're accused of something, especially as a man, especially something vile, the truth doesn't matter. Not right away. People choose a side, and most of them pick the one that lets them feel good about themselves. You'd be amazed at how fast a person becomes invisible. There was a bakery down the street I used to visit every morning. The owner, a sweet older lady named Mrs. Ingram, used to hand me my coffee with a smile and say, "Back at it again." Huh? I walked in one morning like always, only to see her freeze mid-pour. She looked at me, then down at the counter, then muttered, "We're closed today." There were 3 people sitting behind me. A woman at the corner table whispered, "That's him." I walked out without saying a word. By day 5, my phone was practically useless. Tessa had blocked me. So had her mother, Eloise, and all the friends we used to invite over for wine nights and birthdays. Even people I barely knew, friends of friends, suddenly vanished from my contacts. It was like they were afraid the rumor might rub off on them just by association. I once helped Eloise move an entire patio set into her backyard during a heat wave. She called me the most dependable man in the family. Now she was on Facebook commenting under a post about betrayal by blood, saying, "Some men are wolves in family clothing." Wolves. I wasn't even human anymore. I'd kept my mouth shut after the slap, after the beating, after the shame. But reading that, it broke something small and final inside me. I wanted to scream, to fight back, to post screenshots, texts, voicemails, anything to defend myself. But I didn't have anything because there was nothing to prove. No secret meetings, no flirtation, no evidence because the thing they accused me of never happened. But proof wasn't necessary. Not when the lie was more exciting. A friend from college called me that evening. He was one of the few who hadn't ghosted me yet. "Hey man," he said cautiously. "Look, I don't want to pry, but did you really?" I hung up before he finished because of someone who had known me for 10 years had to ask. Then I didn't want to talk to him again. I checked into a cheap motel near the edge of the city and stared at the stained ceiling for hours, my mind spinning like a broken fan. How could a single sentence ruin a man's whole life? I thought about the moments I had given so freely. Showing up early to family events, building furniture for Tessa's cousin when he moved, helping Alina install a bookshelf once while she scrolled on her phone and told me I missed a screw. Now I was a ghost in everyone's memory. A nightmare version of myself they could hate and forget without guilt. There was no court date, no trial, no report, just a story. And once it took root, it didn't need sunlight, just whispers. It wasn't about justice. It was about judgment, about moral performance, about looking like you believed women more than actually doing the work to find out what was true. And Alina, she played her part well. I heard from a friend of a friend that she was receiving sympathy gifts, people checking in, calling her brave. Her social media bio even said "Survivor Broken Heart." I wanted to throw up. Tessa didn't even text me. Not once. I checked my bank account and realized I couldn't afford to stay where I was much longer. My severance from the company was frozen, and there were whispers about possible legal action. For what? I didn't even know. And that's when the fear finally hit me. Not the fear of being hated, but the fear of being forgotten, of being no one, a name that meant nothing but shame. I looked in the mirror that night and barely recognized the man staring back. My beard had grown patchy. My eyes were dull. I looked guilty. And that terrified me, because if I looked like that to myself, what did I look like to the world? You think rock bottom comes all at once. It doesn't. It comes slowly, layer by layer, until you realize no one is coming to save you. And if you want to survive, you'll have to become someone else entirely. I packed a small bag, sold the rest, and I bought a one-way ticket. No forwarding address, no destination that made sense. Just away from the lie, from the slap, from the people who let it spread like fire while I stood in the middle burning. When you reach the point where even your name feels like a burden, it's time to let it go. That morning, I walked into a small travel agency tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop, the kind of place most people overlook. The bell above the door jingled like it hadn't been touched in years. A young woman behind the counter looked up from a crossword puzzle and asked, "Where to?" I hesitated. "Anywhere but here," I said quietly. She laughed like I was joking, but I wasn't. I didn't care where I ended up. I just needed a ticket, a direction, and a chance to disappear. By the end of the day, I was seated on a bus heading to a town I couldn't pronounce, with a fake name and a duffel bag containing everything I had left. 2 changes of clothes, a pair of boots, my old laptop, and a brown leather notebook filled with sketches, journal entries, and reminders of the man I used to be. The ride was long and quiet. I sat near the back, watching the landscapes change, city buildings giving way to dry fields, then forests, then a coastline that stretched like it had no end. Somewhere along the way, I stopped counting the hours. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat much. I just stared and thought. It's strange, the kind of silence that settles in after your life explodes. It's not peace, not at first. It's more like a numb fog, the absence of noise that leaves room for guilt and confusion to echo louder. I kept replaying it in my head. The slap, the lie, the way everyone turned away so fast, like they'd been waiting for a reason to hate me. I wondered if there was something in me they'd all seen long before I did. Was I too quiet? Too helpful? Too easy to forget? That last thought lingered more than the rest. Easy to forget. By the time I reached my destination, the fog outside had thickened and the bus was one of only 2 vehicles on a narrow coastal road. The driver pulled into a gravel lot and said, "Last stop." That was fine by me. The place was small, remote, no cell towers, just wooden buildings that looked like they hadn't been painted since the 80s, a harbor with old boats tethered like sleeping dogs, and an inn that doubled as a diner. I walked through the town, duffel bag over my shoulder, and tried not to draw attention. A man with a cigarette hanging from his lips sat on a porch fixing a net. He watched me walk by and nodded. I nodded back. I asked the innkeeper if they rented rooms weekly. She looked me up and down and said, "Cash only." I paid her for the first 2 weeks and asked if she knew anyone looking for help. "Depends what kind of help," she said. "Anything that keeps me moving," I replied. She pointed across the harbor. "Try the dock. Old man named Ben hires folks to clean his gear." Ben didn't ask questions, just handed me gloves and pointed to a stack of fishing nets that smelled like rot and salt. I got to work, and for the first time in weeks, nobody whispered, nobody stared, nobody judged. I was just a man with gloves and a task. I worked until my back screamed and my hands went raw. Then I walked back to my room, collapsed on the thin mattress, and stared at the ceiling until sleep dragged me under. That was my new routine. Wake, work, Washington sleep. No internet, no headlines, no updates, just fog, salt, sweat, and silence. And for a while, that was enough. I didn't tell anyone my real name. I went by Miles. It felt cleaner, simpler, detached. I didn't bring up my past, and no one asked. Some nights I'd walk the shoreline, breathing in the cold air and letting the wind numb my face. Other nights, I wrote in my notebook, not full entries, just fragments. A thought, a sentence, a single word. Sometimes I didn't want to remember. I wanted to rebuild. In town, people started recognizing me, not in the way they used to. No pity, no whispers, just simple greetings. "Morning, Miles. You working the West Dock today? You take coffee with sugar or cream?" They didn't want my story, just my presence. And that was new. The more I kept to myself, the more space I found in my own head. I started running every morning. First a few minutes, then half an hour, then 5 miles at a time. The pain felt good. It made sense. My lungs burned, my legs shook. But it was a pain I chose, a struggle with purpose. After a few months, I started fixing broken things around town: gutters, sheds, boats. A woman named June asked if I could help her update her business website. I told her I wasn't much of a tech guy, but she insisted. I borrowed a laptop from the library, watched tutorials, read forums, and figured it out. Then another shopkeeper asked for help, then another. I didn't realize it then, but something had shifted. I was still invisible, but this time by choice. I was no longer Adrian, the accused. I was Miles, the man with tools and time, and no past to drag behind him. One night, I stood on the dock after work, watching the boat sway under a deep blue sky. The stars were just beginning to peek out, and the water reflected them like a secret mirror. I thought about Tessa, about her face when she believed the worst of me without hesitation. I wondered if she missed me, if she regretted it. But then I pushed the thought away, because it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was this moment, this stillness, this new version of me slowly being built from the wreckage of who I used to be. No headlines, no group chats, no slaps, no screams. Just fog, salt, silence, and the slow, deliberate process of becoming someone no one could erase. The name Miles wasn't just a disguise anymore. It became something else entirely. Not a cover, but a beginning. I didn't choose it for any deep reason at first. It was just the name printed on the back of an old work shirt I found in a donation bin by the pier. Faded letters, blue cotton. Someone had stitched it there long before me. And when the townspeople started calling me by it, I never corrected them. Funny how identity can grow out of scraps. By the end of my first year in that fog-wrapped harbor town, I wasn't just surviving. I was slowly, carefully living again. Ben, the grumpy old fisherman who first gave me work, had a stroke that winter. His daughter, Clara, came back to help him recover. She was tough, practical, and didn't smile much, which suited me fine. One evening, as we closed the nest shed, she said, "You're good with numbers, right?" I shrugged. "Decent." She tossed a salt-stained notebook onto the table. "Try making sense of that." Ben's inventory was a mess, half handwritten, half remembered. I stayed up that night reworking his books, organizing receipts, and sorting out which of the fishing permits had expired. The next morning, I handed Clara a neat spreadsheet and a simple digital ledger. Her eyes widened. "You did this in one night?" I nodded. She stared at the screen. "You ever thought of doing more than just scrubbing nets?" The truth was, I had quietly, secretly in the shadows of the nights I didn't sleep. Coding had always been an interest of mine, but I never needed to rely on it back then. In my past life, I've been too busy being the dependable husband, the son-in-law who fixed gutters, the employee who kept things running but never raised his hand. But here, I had time. Time to build something that was mine. That night, I registered a domain, amrifest.com. Not my real name, not entirely. Just enough to honor the initials I left behind and the man I was trying to become. I started small, building websites for local businesses. The flower shop, a cafe, a boat rental company. Clients didn't see my face. They didn't ask questions. They just liked the results. As money trickled in, I rented a small workshop near the edge of town, one with old floorboards and dusty windows. I bought a second-hand computer, a folding desk, a kettle, and a fan heater. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Every screw I turned into the wall reminded me I was still here, still capable, still building. Somehow, without planning to, I became the unofficial tech guy for the whole coastal strip. Word spread. A man from 2 towns over showed up one day needing help launching an online store for his handmade furniture. A retired teacher wanted to start a blog. A young mother wanted to build a recipe site. I never said no. I charged fair, not cheap. People paid on time. They brought me coffee, bread, stories, and they never asked, "Where are you from?" I didn't know if they were being polite or if they'd simply accepted that I was one of them now. The business grew quietly. I created a separate. I even sponsored a small local race and printed A.M. Reeves Tech on the back of the participants' bibs. One day, I found myself standing at the front of a town council meeting, showing them a new digital system I built to help track public repairs. Me, Adrian Miles, formerly erased, now being applauded in a room full of strangers who knew nothing of the scandal that once buried me alive. I left that meeting and walked to the edge of the harbor just as the sun dipped behind the cliffs. The water glowed like melted gold. I took off my shoes and stood in the sand, letting the tide touch my toes. And I cried. Not out of sadness, out of disbelief. Because I had done what I thought was impossible. I built a version of myself no one could accuse, twist, or destroy. A man with no past, just a present he was finally allowed to own. But with every step forward came a whisper of the past. Sometimes I dream of that day. The slap, the look on Tessa's face, the way her brothers dragged me out like trash. I'd wake up sweating, heart racing, half expecting to find a notice under my door or a mob outside with torches made of memories. But no one came. The truth is, people don't chase ghosts. And that's what I had become by choice. Still, I kept my secrets close. The notebook I once used to scribble pain had become something else. Now, it held plans, wireframes, checklists, and inside its back cover, taped with aging black tape, was a tiny USB drive, one I carried everywhere. It held the recording I had received 6 months after vanishing, forwarded by a mutual acquaintance who didn't know the weight of what they were passing along. Alina's voice, laughing, mocking, confessing. I told them he did it because I hated how perfect they thought he was. He looked at me like I was nothing. So I made him into nothing. I had listened to it exactly once. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just listened. Then I backed it up, locked it away, kept it close. Not for revenge, but as proof that I hadn't imagined it. That the world really had twisted sideways, for no reason other than one jealous woman's lie. It was strange how healing doesn't look like how you imagine it. I didn't stand on a mountain and scream into the wind. I didn't punch walls or write angry letters. I just kept building one site, one system, one quiet success at a time. I hired 2 locals to help with the overflow. Paid them well, gave them flexible hours. When people asked me what motivated me, I said, I know what it feels like to have your life ripped away. So I'm trying to build one no one can take. That was the only truth I ever told them. Sometimes I'd catch a stranger's voice that sounded like Tessa's, or I'd hear the name Alina and freeze for a second. But the town moved on, and so did I. Every wire I fixed, every boat I helped digitize, every broken login I restored, it was a piece of me coming back. Not the old me, a new man. A man with nothing to prove to anyone but himself. A man named Miles. And this time, the only thing I answered to was my own reflection. I remember the sound before anything else. It wasn't a regular knock. It was frantic, desperate, like someone slamming their fists against a wall after realizing the door might be the only way out of drowning. My hands froze on the keyboard. I was mid-email to a client in Zurich, negotiating final terms on a long-term systems upgrade. The cursor blinked, waiting on my thoughts, but I had already stood up. I glanced out the window. Rain came down in sheets. Thick, wild, slashing sideways in the kind of storm that turned streets into rivers. Wind held like it was mourning something. Thunder cracked overhead as I stepped cautiously toward the front door. 3 more bangs, a voice muffled but familiar. My hand paused on the doorknob, and then I heard it. The name I hadn't heard in over 3 years. "Adrian, please." The voice broke on the second syllable, a soft crumble under pressure. It didn't sound like it used to. It was tired, raw, but still unmistakably hers. "Tessa." I opened the door slowly, not because I was unsure, but because I didn't know what would be standing on the other side. I'd imagined this moment, truth be told. Not often, but enough to recognize how much of my healing still hinged on the ghost of her walking through my past. She stood there soaked through, hair plastered to her face, eyes wide with something between guilt and grief. Her arms were wrapped around herself like she was holding herself together from the inside out. "Please, I know you're in there," she whispered, voice trembling. I didn't answer. I didn't move. We just stood there staring at each other while the storm raged around us. I thought about how small she looked, how once I would have rushed to pull her inside, dry her hair, wrap her in a blanket. But that man, the one who used to protect her from everything, he wasn't home. She reached out, touched the doorframe like it might anchor her. "I've been looking for you," she said. "For years." I raised an eyebrow, not because I was surprised, but because I didn't trust anything that started with that sentence. I stepped aside. She hesitated, then walked in like someone returning to a house that once held their name, but no longer remembered their scent. The room was warm, clean, minimal. I lived simple now. A couch, a desk, a few framed photos of sunrises I'd taken during my runs. Nothing that tied me to anyone but myself. She stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, dripping rainwater onto the wooden floor. "How did you find me?" I asked flatly. She looked away. "It took time. A lot of dead ends. I had to hire someone. When I found out the truth, I needed to. I had to try." I watched her carefully. "The truth," I repeated, testing the weight of her words. She nodded, tears starting to form, but still refusing to fall. "I didn't come to argue. I needed you to see me." I needed to explain. I walked to my desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out a small USB drive, the same one I carried like a secret badge of survival. The proof I'd never used, the file I'd never needed to show anyone until now. "I already know everything," I said quietly, handing her the drive. She stared at it like it might burn her. "What is it?" she asked, though I think part of her already knew. "Take it. Go play it. If you still want to talk after that, come back tomorrow." She didn't move at first, didn't blink. Then she took it with trembling fingers and nodded. I walked back to the desk, sat down, returned my attention to the screen. And just like that, she was gone. I listened to the door close, to the sound of her shoes sloshing away in the rain, to the wind pressing against the windows like it wanted to get in too. Then silence for hours. I sat in that silence. I didn't check my phone, didn't look at the clock, just stared out the window as the storm faded into a soft drizzle. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the lives I'd lived in the years since that slap. Since her brothers beat me bloody. Since her silence became louder than the lie itself. What did she expect to find here? A man waiting? A heart that stayed soft? A soul that still had a welcome mat laid out? I didn't know, but I knew one thing. I wasn't her husband anymore. Not legally, not emotionally, not spiritually. The next morning came wrapped in fog, thick and pale like the town itself wanted to hide me from the day ahead. I didn't go out. I didn't check email. I sat by the window with a mug of black coffee, waiting for nothing and expecting less until I saw her. She didn't knock this time. She sat on the porch bench, head bowed, hands placed in her lap like a child awaiting punishment. She looked up when she saw me. Her face was different. Something had shifted. The tears were gone, but so was the fight. Only the ache remained. I stepped outside. She stood. I played it, she said. I nodded. She swallowed hard. I destroyed you. I said nothing. Adrian, I didn't know. I didn't ask. I just believed her. I raised a hand. You don't have to say it. She blinked fast like her body was trying to hold back the flood she hadn't earned the right to release. Do you hate me? She asked, voice cracking. I looked out over the sea. The waves were calm now. Slow? No, I said. Hate takes energy. I don't have anything left to give you. She collapsed to her knees. I didn't reach out, didn't move. I just walked past her. I had a client meeting in 20 minutes. One of the biggest contracts I'd ever landed because life had moved on. And so had I. She came back again the next day. This time, she didn't knock. She just stood across the road watching the front of my workshop, as if trying to gather the courage to step inside. I saw her through the blinds while I was updating a cybersecurity patch for a client's database. I kept typing, kept working, because her presence didn't unnerve me anymore. It didn't stir anything. Not rage, not longing, just curiosity, like watching a storm pass over a mountain you've already climbed. When she finally stepped in, the bell above the door chimed softly. You're busy, she said. I'm always busy, I replied, not looking up. She stepped further in and closed the door behind her. The air smelled like ocean mist and rain-soaked fabric. She still wore the same coat from the day before, and her voice was smaller somehow, like the years away had drained her confidence along with the color from her cheeks. I didn't sleep, she said quietly. I gave her nothing in return. No words, no sympathy. Just the sound of fingers on keys and the subtle hum of the office heater. She walked to the edge of my desk and waited until I looked up. I need to say something, she said. I leaned back and gave her a single nod. I didn't know she recorded it. She whispered more to herself than to me. Alina, I never thought she'd admit it. But she did, I said. Yes, Tessa answered, the word catching in her throat. I knew 2 years ago, I told her calmly. That made her blink. What? I knew 2 years ago about the lie, about the recording, about everything. She stumbled a step back like I'd slapped her with the very silence she once weaponized against me. But you never said anything. No, I said I didn't. Why? She asked, genuinely stunned. Because the truth wouldn't have changed what you did, I replied. It wouldn't undo the slap. It wouldn't erase your brothers dragging me across the lawn like a criminal. It wouldn't fix the weeks I spent hiding from a world that spat on me over something I didn't do. So I stayed quiet. I wanted to see what mattered more to you, my silence or your guilt. She covered her mouth like she might be sick. I could see your legs shaking. I would have come sooner if I had known. But you didn't want to know. I cut in. That's the part you keep skipping. You didn't ask. You didn't doubt. You didn't even flinch. You chose her over me before I could speak. She sat down in the chair across from me, shoulders hunched, face pale. She cried. "Adrienne," she said. Alina cried. And she said you looked at her with hate, that you cornered her, that she didn't know how to say no. I narrowed my eyes. And that was enough for you to decide I deserved to be ruined. I was scared, she snapped suddenly. I didn't know what to believe. And the way she said it, she sounded so broken. "So did I said coldly. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "You didn't come back for the truth," I said. "You came back because you lost everything else." She flinched at that. It landed. I leaned forward, my voice even. "I know about your divorce. I know your family turned on you. I know your mother called it an old scandal and told you to get over it. I know Jared got exposed for that thing at the school and Marco's business folded. I know because I stayed quiet. And while I stayed quiet, the truth had time to grow legs of its own." Her mouth trembled, but she said nothing. "You didn't come back because of regret," I continued. "You came back because you needed something to feel clean again." "No," she said quietly. "That's not true." "It is," I said, "and that's okay. I'm not mad about it. I'm just not giving you what you came here for." She looked confused. "What do you think I came here for?" "Redemption," I said. "Closure. Maybe even forgiveness." I paused, let the silence thicken between us. "But what you don't realize is I forgave you a long time ago. Not for your sake, for mine. I had to. Otherwise, I wouldn't have survived. But forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. It doesn't mean welcome. It just means I stopped carrying your actions like they were mine." Tessa's shoulders shook as she covered her face with her hands. For a moment, she just sat there and let herself break in front of me. No mascara, no crowd, no performance, just a woman buried under the rubble of her own decisions. When she finally looked at me again, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "Do you think we could ever fix this?" I tilted my head, not angry, just honest. "No," I said. She nodded slowly. "I understand," she whispered. "I deserve that. No one deserves to be lied about like I was," I said. "But people make mistakes. The problem is you made yours and let me pay for it alone." We sat there for another minute. No more words, just breath and space and all the invisible things that had lived between us for too long. She finally stood, straightened her coat. "I'll go now," she said. I nodded. "Take care of yourself." She opened the door and looked back one last time. "I hope you find happiness," she said. "I already have," I replied. And I meant it. She left. No begging, no more promises, no more twisted stories, just the truth and silence. And the man who had survived both. I don't know how long she stood there on my porch the next day, but when I finally stepped outside, she was already sitting on the bench, back straight, hands clenched in her lap like a child waiting for judgment. She didn't look at me at first, just kept her eyes on the gravel path leading from my steps to the road. I stood there in the doorway, the morning air still cool from the night's mist. Birds chirped overhead. The town was just beginning to stir. Early joggers, a couple of dock workers shouting greetings across the water. But all I could hear was the silence between us. That old familiar silence that once meant comfort and now just stretched tight like a wire between two cliffs. She looked up finally, and there was something gone from her eyes. Pride, maybe hope, maybe the last piece of the story she had tried to hold together in her mind. "I listened to it," she said. I didn't respond. I listened to her voice again and again. It didn't sound like her, and that's what scared me the most. Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry. Not this time. It wasn't the version of Alina I knew. Or maybe it was the only real version, and I never wanted to see it. I stepped onto the porch but didn't sit. I didn't owe her comfort. I just owed myself closure. She was laughing, Tessa said quietly, staring at the wooden floor beneath her feet. Just laughing like she'd pulled off the cleverest trick in the world. I nodded slowly because to her that's what it was. She finally looked at me then in her face. God, her face. It carried years of denial, of swallowing a lie so deep, it became part of her. And now that lie was gone, surgically cut away by truth, and all that was left was scar tissue. She said she did it because you looked at her like she was nothing. She was mad that I never wanted her attention. I said simply, she mistook basic decency for rejection. She wanted to punish me for not being what she needed to feel special. Tessa closed her eyes. She hated me too. You know, she said, I think that's what I didn't want to believe. That it wasn't just about you. It was about both of us. What we had. What we represented to her. Possibly, I said. But that doesn't change what she did or what you did after. She flinched, and I saw her chest rise as she took a slow breath. I keep wondering, she whispered. If she had never confessed, if that recording never existed, would I have ever seen it? Would I have kept living with the version of you in my head that she painted? The one I helped make real. That was the question, wasn't it? And I could tell from the way she said it. She already knew the answer. You came back because the illusion collapsed, I said. Not because you were searching for the truth. You just didn't have anything left to hold on to. She didn't argue. I remember, she said, her voice a little stronger now. The day it all happened. I keep playing it back in my mind. You were holding coffee. You looked calm, confused. But I didn't see that then. I just saw a problem I needed to solve. And you were the problem. I looked out toward the dock. The water glistened under the rising sun. There's something people don't understand about betrayal, I said slowly. It's not just the lie. It's not even the slap. It's the speed. How quickly someone decides you're guilty. How fast they throw away everything you ever were to them. That's what breaks you. She nodded, tears silently sliding down her cheeks now. She didn't wipe them away. I ruined you, she said again, barely audible. I didn't correct her. I didn't soothe her. Because sometimes people need to sit in the mess they made. I told myself for so long that maybe it wasn't as bad as it felt, she continued. That maybe it was just a mistake. But hearing her voice, mocking, so proud of what she did, it shattered everything I built to protect myself. She stood now slowly, like the weight of her confession pressed on every joint. I'm not here to fix anything, she said. I know that's not possible. I'm not here for your forgiveness either. I don't deserve it. I just needed to look you in the eye after hearing that recording because I needed you to see that I know now. I looked at her. Really looked. And what I saw wasn't the woman I used to love. Not the wife who used to laugh at my bad cooking or sneak her cold feet under my legs at night. That woman died the same day the lie was born. This woman was a stranger who had walked through fire, she said herself. And she came out burned. But maybe finally honest. There's nothing left to rebuild, I said. She nodded. I know. She stepped off the porch and turned back once. For what it's worth, I hope the life you built now gives you peace. Because you deserve it, Adrian. I let her name hang in the air a moment before I responded. It does, I said simply. And then I walked back inside and closed the door behind me. Not angrily, not bitterly, just finally. There would be no rekindled love, no dramatic apologies, no hugs in the rain. What the tape revealed wasn't just Elena's lie. It revealed what had always been there between us. Doubt, distance, the kind of love that collapses under the first strike, because it was never strong enough to survive honesty. And I had survived it without her, without all of them. Because sometimes, the only way to reclaim your name is to stop asking others to spell it right. I thought that after the tape, after the final confrontation, that would be the last I'd see of her. I figured she'd return to whatever scraps were left of her old life, vanish back into the mess she helped create, and that would be it. But Tessa didn't leave. She stayed. Not in my home, not even on my street, but in the town. She rented a small first from the innkeeper who helped her settle in, then from Clara at the net shed, who saw her buying groceries with shaky hands. I didn't go looking. I didn't ask why she stayed. I didn't care to. But I noticed she didn't walk around with her head held high. There was no arrogance, just stillness, like someone trying not to disturb the air. She volunteered at the town clinic, helped clean up the beach after storms, started tutoring kids after school. I watched from a distance, not because I was curious about her redemption arc, but because part of me was trying to understand why I wasn't angry anymore. She didn't ask to be near me. She didn't knock again. She just showed up in the world I had built, carefully, quietly, like she knew she was stepping through something fragile and sacred that didn't belong to her. At first, the locals didn't know who she was to me, and she didn't tell them. But small towns have long memories and even longer whispers. A few people connected the dots. A few came to me privately asking, "You all right with this?" I always gave the same answer. She's not mine to chase off. She's just here. They nodded, and that was that. One afternoon, I saw her at the farmer's market. She was holding a bag of apples, laughing softly with one of the older women who sold honey. The sun caught her hair, and for a second, the memory of who she used to be flickered in my mind. Then it passed. She saw me, and instead of waving or smiling, she just nodded. I nodded back. That was the new language between us. No words, no open wounds, just acknowledgement. Like two travelers who once shared a path, but now moved in opposite directions. Weeks passed, then months. She became part of the town in the same way I had by earning it. Not asking for anything, just doing the work. People asked less about her and more about my business again. Clients grew. I hired a third developer, bought better equipment. I even started giving talks at the local college about digital identity and online resilience. I never spoke about my past, but every word I shared came from it. And yet, in the quiet of my evenings, I couldn't shake the ache of one question. Would she have come if Alina had never confessed? The answer always sat like a stone in my stomach. No, she wouldn't have. Her return wasn't born from faith. It was born from fallout. And forgiveness, as people love to preach, doesn't fix that. I could forgive her for being human, for being gullible, for making a choice under pressure. But I couldn't forget that when everything crumbled, she let me fall first. She chose to believe a lie over the man who held her during her worst nights. The man who took care of her mother when she broke her hip. The man who used to trace maps on her back with his fingers and plan dreams with his eyes closed. I didn't hate her anymore, but I didn't trust her either. And trust, that was the thing forgiveness couldn't rebuild. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the lighthouse, she approached me while I was locking up the workshop. The sky was bruised purple waves licking the dock gently. "Do you mind?" she asked, gesturing to the wooden bench near the stairs. I shrugged. "It's a public bench." She sat beside me, not too close. "I'm not trying to win you back," she said softly. "I know," I replied. "I just wanted to say thank you." That caught me off guard. For what? For not telling everyone who I was. For letting me exist here without dragging your story behind me like chains. I looked at her, and for the first time, I saw the difference between apology and accountability. She wasn't here to be forgiven. She was here to carry the weight she should have carried long ago. I didn't keep it quiet for you. I said I did it because I needed peace. And retelling the worst parts of my life to strangers doesn't bring that. She nodded. "I never asked you that day when I slapped you when it all started." She hesitated, searching for words. What were you going to say before everything went sideways? I stared out at the water. I was going to ask what the hell she was talking about, I said. Because it was so out of left field, I thought it had to be a joke. I was stunned, that's all. I didn't even get a chance to defend myself. Tessa looked away, ashamed. And instead of asking me one question, I continued. "You hit me. You let them drag me outside. You let it happen." "I know," she whispered. "And you've got to live with that," I said, "not because I want you to suffer, but because that's the consequence. That's the echo of choices we don't get to undo." "I do live with it," she said. Every day we sat in silence again. And then, as the sky darkened, she stood. "This will be the last time I talk to you directly," she said. "I needed to say those things, but I'll respect the space you've created. I won't interfere." I nodded, and as she turned to walk away, I said one last thing. "You're doing good work at the clinic." She stopped, turned slightly, and smiled. "Thank you." Then she walked into the evening haze and didn't look back. And I sat on the bench, listening to the wind, the tide, the creak of the dock. I thought about everything we'd been through, the lies, the fall, the return. And I realized something important. Closure doesn't come with grand apologies or neatly tied endings. It comes in pieces, in nods across markets, in shared silence, in distance maintained not from anger, but from knowing better. Forgiveness can clear the air, but it doesn't rebuild bridges. And sometimes peace is just knowing you don't have to try anymore. I never wanted revenge. Not really. It's a messy word bloated with bitterness, dripping with energy. I no longer had to give. I didn't want to destroy anyone. I didn't want to make them hurt the way I had. I just wanted the truth to live. So I let it. It started on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The fog had rolled in thick over the docks, swallowing the horizon in a soft gray hush. I was at my desk sipping lukewarm coffee, scrolling through a forum on small business cybersecurity, when I saw a trending story on one of the discussion boards. False accusation ruins man's life until truth surfaces. I clicked it out of habit. But what I saw wasn't a coincidence. It was my story posted anonymously. No names, no photos, just details, frighteningly accurate ones, about a man accused by his sister-in-law of getting her pregnant, betrayed by his wife and family, beaten, fired, ostracized, only to vanish, start again, and later discover the entire accusation was a lie. and attach at the bottom an audio file. Alina's voice, her smug confession. I told them he did it because I hated how perfect they thought he was. He looked at me like I was nothing, so I made him into nothing. Word for word, the same file I had tucked away for over 2 years. I didn't upload it, but I knew who did. Tessa. She must have copied it after I gave her the original. Maybe it was her version of setting things right, or maybe she couldn't carry the weight alone anymore. Either way, the internet had it now, and there was no putting it back in the box. Within hours, the story spread. Blogs picked it up, forums dissected it. People debated in the comments whether it was real or fake. But it didn't matter. The voice was real. The confession was real. And soon people started connecting dots. It didn't take long. The whispers returned. But this time, not around me. This time they wrapped around the people who once buried me. Alina's job at a mid-sized PR firm gone. Their CEO issued a public statement. We do not tolerate any behavior that undermines the dignity of others. She vanished from social media within a week. Jared, Tessa's brother and former high school football coach, resigned after an anonymous complaint referenced past involvement in physical violence based on unproven accusations. Someone leaked the video of him dragging me outside by my collar. It resurfaced like a curse. Their mother, Eloise, she sat on the board of a local charity that supported women's shelters. When the board found out about her public comments, some men are wolves in family clothing made before any investigation. She was asked to step down. They never saw a courtroom, but they faced a judgment far worse. The court of public truth. No lawyers, no gavels. Just reflection in the mirror of a world that had moved on without them and didn't want them back. And me, I stayed quiet. I didn't confirm, didn't deny. I didn't gloat or add fuel. I just kept living, kept working, kept building the life they thought they could ruin. People in town began approaching me differently, not out of pity, but with respect. I read something online, one man said at the marina. Didn't mention names, but if it's even half true. I'm sorry for what you went through. I nodded. That was all I needed. Another woman at the cafe placed a croissant and coffee on my table and said, "On the house." Life didn't change drastically, but it felt lighter, like I was walking with the wind at my back instead of against it. Tessa didn't speak to me during this time, but I saw her. She kept her head down, kept working at the clinic, kept living quietly. I could only imagine what it felt like for her to watch her family unravel under the weight of the truth they once ignored. She had set the fire, but she hadn't walked away. She stood in the ashes, let the smoke sting her eyes, and didn't ask for sympathy. In some small, silent way, I respected that. One morning, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, no handwriting, just typed words on clean white paper. You didn't have to do it that way, but you did. You let the truth breathe instead of turning it into a weapon. I don't deserve your kindness, but thank you for not destroying us when you had every right to. I see that now. Dust. I folded the paper and placed it in a drawer with the others. Not because I needed to read it again, but because I wanted to remember that sometimes justice doesn't come with fire. Sometimes it comes with quiet, undeniable truth. And sometimes that's enough. People often think justice is loud, that it needs a stage, a verdict, an audience on their feet. But what I learned in those weeks was this: justice can be a whisper, a post online, a recording set free, a simple nod from someone who once doubted you. Justice doesn't always punish. Sometimes it just reveals. And once revealed, people can no longer look away. They have to live with what they see. That's what happened to Alina, to Eloise, to Jared. They weren't jailed. They weren't fined. But the world saw them. The truth saw them. And more importantly, they saw themselves. One evening, just before closing time, a teenager walked into my workshop. Looked about 17, nervous, shifting on his feet. "You the guy who built the Truth blog?" he asked. I frowned. "What?" he stammered. "That story online about the lie and how the guy disappeared but came back stronger. That's you, right?" I didn't answer, but I didn't need to. He nodded slowly. "I just wanted to say that story helped me a lot. I almost gave up on myself this year. People thought I did something I didn't do. I started to believe it too." He pulled something from his backpack, a sketch pad. "My teacher told me to draw something that made me feel strong again. I drew this." He showed me a page. A faceless man standing in a storm, lightning behind him, feet planted firm. The caption read, "Truth doesn't flinch." I stared at it for a long time. Then I stood, shook his hand, and said, "You hold on to that strength. Don't let them rewrite you." He left with a smile, and I sat down behind my desk, a strange calm washing over me. It hit me then why I had never posted the recording myself. Why I had waited. Why I had rebuilt first. Because justice isn't just about them knowing what they did. It's about you knowing who you are, no matter what they said. There are two kinds of people in this world. Those who are made by what happens to them, and those who choose who they become after. I used to think I was the first. Back then, I moved through life trying to be good, reliable, useful. I thought that if I loved hard enough, gave enough, forgave fast enough, the people around me would see me. They'd stand by me. But when the storm came, they didn't hold on. They let go. And I fell. But the thing about falling is sometimes you land on something solid yourself. These days, I still wake early. Not because I'm haunted anymore, but because I like the quiet before the town stirs. I brew my coffee slowly. Watch the morning fog roll over the harbor. I don't check my phone right away. I don't scroll through headlines or chase news. I sit, breathe, and remind myself that peace doesn't come in breaking headlines. It comes in the absence of needing to be seen. I walk into town most mornings, not because I have to, but because I can. People greet me now. The kind of greetings that come without caution, without judgment. It took years, but I earned that, not by proving my innocence, not by screaming my side of the story, but by living in a way that made the lie irrelevant. I pass the clinic sometimes, and I see Tessa through the glass. She's usually bent over a clipboard or tending to one of the kids from town. Sometimes our eyes meet, and when they do, we both nod. No more, no less. She kept her promise. She never crossed the line again. Never came to speak. Never tried to make it something it wasn't. And I respected her more for that than any apology she could have given. I know her family scattered now. Alina moved to another city, changed her name online, tried to reinvent herself. But you can't outrun your reflection. Not forever. Jared teaches part-time somewhere last I heard. Eloise spends most of her days traveling, maybe to find places where no one recognizes her face. And me, I stayed. I own 3 buildings in town now. Rented one to a couple starting a podcast studio, another to a marine gear supplier. My tech business runs almost entirely online these days, with clients across 6 countries and growing. I never marketed myself heavily. I didn't need to. The work speaks just like the truth did. But here's the part no one teaches you when your life burns to the ground. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't come with banners or thunder or applause. Healing is quiet, subtle. It happens in ordinary moments. Sipping tea while coding, picking out a new chair for the office, helping a stranger carry boxes up the stairs. One afternoon, about a year after the story broke online, a local school reached out. They were organizing a youth program on digital ethics and resilience. They asked me if I'd speak, not because they knew my story, but because they'd seen the life I built and thought it might inspire the kids. I said yes. When I walked into that room, a dozen young faces looked up at me. Some were eager, some were bored, a few just curious. I told them my journey sanitized. Of course, I didn't speak about betrayal or slander. I spoke about starting over, about losing everything and choosing to learn instead of collapse. One boy asked, "How do you stop being angry at the people who ruined your life?" I smiled. "You don't," I said. "You just stop giving them rent in your head. You stop carrying their actions like they're part of your identity. You outgrow their power over you by building a life so full they can't squeeze into it." He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. Maybe one day those words will matter to him. That night I stood on my porch with a cup of warm cider and stared at the sky. No clouds, just stars. 1,000 quiet lights blinking above me, indifferent to everything below. I thought about the man I used to be, the one who stood stunned in his kitchen, coffee cup in hand, watching his life collapse because of a sentence someone else invented. I didn't recognize him anymore. He was too soft, too eager to please, too believe love was something owed rather than something earned. And now I am deliberate with my time, with my trust, with my silence. Tessa once asked me months ago, before she finally let go completely, "Do you think we could ever find a way back?" I didn't answer then. I just looked at her. But if she asked me now, I'd say this: that man you were married to, he's gone. He died the moment you slapped him without asking a single question. The man who stands here now, he doesn't belong to your story anymore. He wrote a new one. People assume survival is the end, but survival is just the beginning. Because once you realize you can survive being erased, you start to wonder what you could become if you stopped trying to be acceptable and started being true. True to yourself, to your own voice, to your own worth. I don't live for validation anymore. I live for the version of me that I almost lost. The one who picked up the pieces in the dark and learned how to shape them into something new. My name is Adrian Miles. I was accused, beaten, erased, abandoned. But I didn't stay buried. I came back not